Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. As we do on Saturdays, we're going to wrap this week up with an album review, which is where we explore an entire album, track by track, exploring what each song does in isolation and its context within the larger work. Today we're going to be checking out a band that I don't know, the Drones. I guess in the big picture, there's so many artists out there that it's probably more common for me not to know who they are. But within the community, we tend to sit within a nice knit of, a tight knit group of artists that after 5 years, we start to see a lot of similar names. So I find it really interesting when someone from the community gives me something from a band that I haven't been introduced to yet. Now, they are called The Drones, which immediately makes me think of the early 2000s. Lots of bands were coming out with The Blank, and they did come from that era. Their debut EP was in '01. However, this album comes from later in their career. This is a 2013 album, See Seaweed. We're going to kick off with the title track. This is the second longest song on the album. There's only 8 tracks. We're looking at 52 minutes of music, though. Most of these songs are going to be a bit on the longer side. Let's dive in, see what's going on with See Seaweed. Some heavy use of dissonance, detuning, contrasted with harmonious ideas.
See seaweed on the lawn. There's no point coming here no more. Do you remember way back when we sank in the swimming pool? Holidays were cotton wool. Your ball tie friends, the pelicans, cowboys and Indians. I admitted she was kinda cute. Her panties were your parachute. But they found her near the airport, in a crater near the bend, where she and I'd walk by the zoo, not knowing we do what all plays do. I forget her all the time these days and be forgotten too. We're like stepping in our billions, like stepping in our swarms, like stepping in the certainty that more need to be born. I was fine.
It's a nice sense of contrast and dynamics in the vocal performance.
Lord, it choked my heart, but spades are spades. My head's here now to tell you, we're like stepping in our billions, like stepping in our swarms, like stepping in the certainty that more need to be born. Just the way things are. Yeah, you always went too far. Ain't that just the way things passports, please, sir, you are next. Do you fly direct or indirect? As the years bleed off, that answer's getting harder to detect. Like all the rare air on the cabin floor, Your in-flight films
A lot of
score
charisma,
that should
too.
be settled.
When the
once
song dips down like this, I get so sucked into the story. It's just the way he delivers
Now
it.
it's prefab bars, tax-free cigars, stopovers in Bahrain, and they put horse tracks in the fuel tanks, and the staff are all insane. And we're like stepping in our billions, like stepping in our swarms, like stepping in the certainty that morning to be born. I'm like a Lockheed in a thunderhead, an Airbus in the sea. The sky is blue, I am too. Yeah, everything seems clear. We're like stepping in our billions, like stepping in our swarms, like stepping in the certainty that morning to be born.
I love the placement of the guitar. There's this massive sound surrounding everything. That light staccato jazzy piano.
She'd recollect how fucked you were, all matter of a fact, and then defend you, being squeamish about the knife stuck in her back. And Lord, she only sang the dead bird songs, and now I know them all. It's like I'm shooting at a shadow that a bomb burned on the wall. And we're like stepping in our billions, like stepping in our swarms, like stepping in the certainty that morning to be born. There ain't no making what you're breaking, and nothing left of her to clone. I can't remember how she looked, although I do recall her smile coming down the telephone.
The fake out there without the tremolo guitar off on the left to bring us in. Moments like that, distinct choice to play every wrong note. Jeez. I have a whole album of that ahead of me. Oh, okay. That was rough in the best kind of way. Every bit of that, the tempo, the harmonic choices, the melody, the spaciousness, the production, the timbre, the vocal delivery, every bit of it was designed to hone in on a specific atmosphere. Despite its length, there's really not a lot of new ideas popping up in this. The length is mostly there, I think, to really cement and hone in on this one feeling. This feeling of, I don't know, heavy, abysmal depression, weight. It just feels impossible to get out of. That's what I get out of this track. And some verses are worse than others. This isn't something that it's constantly the same. This isn't a song that says, oh, it gets better. This is a song that says it fluctuates. uh, and it really leans into that and presents something that's almost unrelenting. And it honestly feels like every time we get to that chorus, it gets worse. The vocals get rawer, the guitars get gnarlier, the melody gets tenser. It's it's just an intense track, man. I'm kind of happy that track 2 is only 4 minutes long. I'm kind of hoping it acts as a little bit of a breather. But then we got a 6 minute, another 4, and then a 7, a 6, a 6, and a 9. And if all of these songs are going heavy into this dense weight, it's going to be tough for me to get through, I think. All right, what's going on with this? Like I said, there's not a lot. I think this is going to be a rather short analysis, 20, 30 minutes maybe tops. Um, we have the verse, and I love the verse. If nothing else, then for contrast, but I think they go about this very intelligently. Obviously, the chorus is bigger, larger, more bombastic than the verse. We have that buildup of the tremolo picking and the guitar on the left that tends to rise in pitch and volume before these massive guitars come in. That's when the chorus hits. It's the big moment of the song. And this does go through a pretty typical verse chorus, bridge, chorus, verse chorus. I don't remember if we had a third verse or not. I feel like we did. Yeah, we did. Anyways, very typical structure right there. Either way, whether there's that third verse or not. The verse is there to act as the counter to that really big chorus. And they achieve this by being the opposite. Small, empty. It isn't just that the volume is brought down. It isn't just that there's less instruments performing at one time. It's that there's just not a lot of things happening. In fact, this section is very happy with just having the drum beat and the vocals at times. Maybe the resonant tone of a bass string that was, picked 30 seconds ago, but is still resonating this low pulse under everything, but no new notes coming from it. And just allowing this silence, this gap of space to exist. Sometimes we just get the drums. It's really amazing how confident they are at playing nothing during this verse, and to me it absolutely sells the smallness of the section in a way that you wouldn't be able to get without that overuse almost of rests, of telling these instruments, don't play anything. Come in 4 bars, play something there, and then be silent for the next 3 bars. And I love that. This I think is a fantastic example of maximizing the use of silence in music. But like I mentioned on that second verse, because all of this stuff gets removed, it's very easy to have the focus drawn towards the vocals. They're the only thing that's really moving. The drums have a beat, but it's just a pattern. Once you catch on to it, not much else to learn from there other than just to kind of bob your head to. The vocals, they're the storyteller. They're prominent in the mix. There's movement to it. There's novelty. It continues to adapt and change its melodic line, its phrasing, even its the way that the words are pronounced. Why can't I think of that? But there are moments when he just kind of slurs words and syllables together, almost as if giving up on the thought of proper speech at all, and other times when he just really leans into specific sounds and makes sure you can feel the enunciation on each syllable. Really hammering home this idea. I've noticed it a lot on hard T sounds. I can't think of any specific word, but if you would say something like teeth, it would be teeth. Just really emphasizing that first, the big T sound, and then even maybe the vowel afterwards. But these moments are, again, balanced out by the more calm sections. Then, of course, the slurred ideas. And it's like I mentioned, he's got a charisma, a natural storytelling knack. It sounds interesting to listen to. He just has that X factor to tell a story in an interesting way, regardless of what the words are. I don't know what the song is about. I picked up on lines here and there, but I didn't pick up on enough, I guess. What I have is sort of scatterbrained, and I don't know how it all ties together, but to say that I was enthralled by his delivery, I think would be an understatement. Anytime we got back to a verse, that's all I cared about. I just listened to how he spoke, what kind of energy and emotion and inflection he used. This, of course, contrasts heavily with the chorus, which I've already mentioned is the big part. You can't miss it. What I love about this is even prior to this, in the pre-chorus, for at least the first and second chorus, I mentioned the tremolo picking off on the left, the rising volume and pitch on that, and then I think on the right side there's some feedback that's rising in volume as well. You can feel this growth into that really big first downbeat of the chorus where the weight kicks in. But I think what's interesting there is that the guitars that come in, the really big ones that make this section sound heavy, where are they placed? I urge you, if you can't really think of it right now, head back to one of those first choruses. And listen, even with the guitar and the feedback off on the side, those really big hits come around them. It captures everything of the song and surrounds it. Every instrument in the verse, every instrument in that pre-chorus is within the atmosphere of these massive guitars. They don't come in as a part of the song. They come in as the hazy atmosphere, the wall of fog that sits on the outskirts that blocks your vision from seeing anything past them. It encapsulates the song and says, this is as far as you'll be able to hear. Nothing exists past us. And I really love that. Because you could easily create this where those big guitars come in kind of closer to the listener as far as spacing goes, and kind of be in that same area that all the instruments have been up until this point. And then I don't think I would notice anything about it. I don't think there really is a difference in either of these two ideas. But it's the contrast of them. Most bands, I think, would just place it in that same area the instruments have been. They said we're going to extend that out a little bit. And what that does for me is extend it outside the realms of everything else. The rest of the instruments are part of the narrative. This heavy weight is not. This is the extent of the art. It is the frame, it is the border around the painting now. And just like when you are getting ready to frame a painting, the frame matters too. It might not be part of the art, but you want it to complement your art, and it still says something about the art. And I think the same is here too. It frames everything with this weight. The song's already weighty, right? Everything about the verse feels dark, it feels heavy, it feels depressive, it feels impossible to pull yourself out of. The atmosphere of the chorus doesn't really change that at all. It is a new kind of weight, it is a present kind of weight, sure, but it's not like this section magically made the song heavy and the verse was light and poppy. No, it's always been implied. This is just a more direct showcasing of it. I think it's a perfect way to frame it. I love it. Every bit of that is just so freaking cool. And it's a decision, like I said, if they had chosen not to do it, I really don't think it would have changed much about the song. But because they did, that's elevated it. And I gotta point out things like that. Little nuances that make a solid 7 or 8 track into a 9 or 10. It's always the little things, and they sold me on that. The last thing I think I want to bring up before we hit lyrics here is just harmony in general. After both of the first two choruses, we move into the pre-verse after the first chorus and moving into the bridge after the second chorus with a jazzy piano idea. Muted, very staccato piano hits. You get the plunk of the key, and that's it. Very little resonance. But the note choices themselves fit nothing of what's going on. It ditches the moody, dark weight for something very light. Not happy, but complacent, maybe? Okay with things? And of course, it's paired with these lighter pitches, which we really don't hear anywhere else in the track. A lot of the song is in the mid to low range for note choices. This one's quite a bit higher, and also, like I mentioned, it's sort of a plunky kind of sound. And it's staccato, it's not these big, long, reverberating notes. It's sort of the antithesis to everything else and presents something very light and dexterous and bouncy almost, with the harmonic shift giving it a uplifting, semi-uplifting jazziness. It stands out so hard against the rest of the song, and we only get it in these two moments. What's going on there? I don't know what that represents. Honestly, I don't know what the song means. So maybe when we hit the lyrics, those ideas might make a little bit more sense, but they certainly stand out to me. The same goes for the guitar solo in that final chorus, bringing in total dissonance. Like I mentioned, it's an intentional choice to play all of the wrong notes. Every single note choice in there was probably the least balanced note they could have played. Every single bit of it was like nails on a chalkboard to me. It lasts for, I don't know, 4 bars maybe, and then is gone. The guitar immediately locks back in step with the harmonic palette and chooses all the right notes again to present this heavy, weighty atmosphere, but with consonant harmony rather than dissonant. For a brief moment, the guitar to me shows utter disintegration of harmony. Again, much like the piano deviating earlier, I don't know what this is supposed to represent, and I hope the lyrics lean into that a little. but it does stand out. At least this makes a little bit more sense. The song is dark and dreary and moody and heavy and having dissonance in there, a rejection of norm and anger. I can see how that fits. I don't know how the slightly joyous part comes in. Unless, of course, it's just supposed to be antithetical to the rest of the harmony. I think that's about it. Oh, yeah, one last thing. The vocals are just heartbreaking, dude. They get more intense over the course of the track, and that final chorus, and the dude's voice is cracking left and right. He's putting so much pain and anger into the delivery, and that paired with the overbearing atmosphere, the guitar deciding to go dissonant rather than harmonic or consonant, it's a very affecting finale to this track. And you can feel it growing into that. You know it's coming, and you just can't do anything about it. The brakes are broken, and you're on the ride till the end now, even though you can see that wall you're careening towards. So yeah, that was a rough end to this track. Let me find some lyrics to this, see what's going on. I think this song is about too much, or maybe it's just too scattered. Maybe there's a way to bring everything together, and I don't see it. The beginning talks about childhood and it just not being the same anymore, life as an adult. It says, I see seaweed on the lawn, there's no point coming here no more. Do you remember way back when weeks sank in the swimming pool, holidays were cotton wool, your bald tire friends, the pelicans, cowboys, and Indians? All the games we used to play. We would spend weeks in the pool just chilling, not really doing anything in particular. From here, though, we immediately cut to a woman who has presumably passed away and asking his friend, hey, you remember her, right? She was kind of cute. I kind of forget her these days. It's interesting. I think this jarring change from our childhood was great. I kind of miss it. To remember this person from our childhood, I kind of don't anymore, but I remember the tragic part. It goes into a little bit of detail about where they found her body. But at the end, he says, I kind of forget her. The chorus then shifts to overpopulation. It says lockstepping in billions, lockstepping in our swarm, lockstepping in the certainty that more need to be born. The second part of this chorus seems to allude to how he was dealing with the grief of this girl that he was talking about. He says, I was fine, but not the whole time. I fiddled while Rome stewed. It choked my heart, but spades is spades. My head's here now to tell you. It seems to say that he ignored the grief he was going through. He said he was fine, but not the whole time. He says that it did choke my heart. But that's the way things go. So now I'm here to tell you this. We're lockstepping in our billions. We go back to this overpopulation thing. Where's the synergy here? What's the point of all of these different ideas? A repeated phrase that comes up in this song. Ain't that just the way things are? Ain't that the way things go? The second verse appears to be about spending too much time flying between countries. It says, passports please, sir, you're next. Do you fly direct or indirect? As the years bleed off, that answer is getting harder to detect. Like all the rare air on the cabin floor, your in-flights films a score that you should be settled. Once the holster calcifies around your neck, but now it's prefab bars, tax-free cigars, stopovers in Bahrain, and they put horse tranks in the fuel tanks and the staff are all insane. What does this have to do with anything else? What is the through line on all of this? I do want to point to something here, though. I love the way that he introduces specific syllabic rhymes here at the very end. He mentions now it's prefab bars and tax-free cigars, keeping that ARS thing going on, and stopovers in Bahrain, which actually comes up later when he says the staff are all insane. But then we also have another interline rhyme where they put horse tranks in the fuel tanks. There's just lots of really great syllabic use here. And that happens all throughout, by the way. This guy has a really interesting way of creating his flow and how he manipulates and moves between specific syllables and the rhymes of them, sometimes not using rhyme at all even, which I think is interesting, as just like the verse is emphasized because of its lack of sound against the chorus, some of these stanzas are also emphasized because of their lack of rhyme against very intricate rhymes. I really dig it. But I mean, later on, we bring up the idea of shadows burned onto buildings after bombs go off. So now we have explosions, warfare, death being brought in too. And that is right before we talk about lockstepping and billions again, before we bring that chorus back about overpopulation. The penultimate stanza says, there ain't no making what you're breaking, and nothing left of her to clone. I can't remember how she looked, although I do recall her smile coming down the telephone. So we go back to that girl again from his past. And once again, he has difficulties remembering her, but there are small details that he still kept in his mind. I don't know what the through line is on all of this. Overpopulation to loss of childhood innocence to, I don't know, almost being tired of adult life, wishing that you could just spoil away a summer again, just hanging out with your friends. Over to war and the brutality of that, and then flying too much and how it can mess with someone's perception of reality. And I don't know. This is very scattershot. The best interpretation I have of it is that most of this is negative and heavy, and it's all definitely a part of life. But if you think about all of this all the time, you just spiral. You fall into a depression. Maybe this is supposed to be talking about the difficult balancing act and sort of the ridiculousness of needing to compartmentalize our understanding of the world with our place in it. It's a lot easier to focus on one negative aspect of life and just kind of worry about what you need to do in your day than really think about all the ways that our world is screwed up and how there's no coming back from it. It's really easy to slip into that and not come back out. And I think the song, with its ever increasing intensity, weight, darkness. I mean, I said that this song was just had an abysmal atmosphere. It has no intent of getting better, and through the music, it doesn't. Maybe that's what it's commenting on. If you focus on all the negative things, it's easy to get swept up in that. I feel like I'm grasping at straws with that read, though. I don't know if that's actually what they're going for. Alright. One song down, feeling worse off than when I started this video. Oh, fingers crossed the album picks up in attitude. It probably won't, right? How to See Through Fog. Well, that's an interesting title. Let's dive into it. Ooh. Yeah. I like that. It gives you the beats. Just constant accents on the beat, but it has these little pickups into it. Makes it feel bouncy.
From treetops down candle wax roofs.
It's still rather heavy though.
Rain towels drown
The piano bringing a levity, but overall, it's a very hazy atmosphere. I wouldn't say very positive at all.
And they only ever treat you well when you're nothing but a church bell. And they
That was a fun little use of panning.
think you're good when you're walking like you're made of wood. It's another Friday afternoon. You shut the shell.
Another song that uses space and quieter sections to contrast the louder, busier, larger chorus.
Like it ain't Kenya at the zoo. And they
Love that guitar sound. You guys know I'm a sucker for bluesy guitar work.
when you're walking on
Bringing in that blues rock grit.
And they only ever treat you kind when you're talking like you'll change your mind. You're nothing but a church bell. And they only ever think you're good when you're walking like you're made of wood. And they only ever treat you well when you're walking on an eggshell. And they only ever treat you kind when you're talking like you'll change your mind.
Oh, interesting too. So that chorus is 4-4-3-4. It's what makes that odd skip after the alternating panning.
A fire color tied around it where the cock fight. And an end to see you in hindsight. Ooh.
And this is a 7. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't actually notice that the first couple of times through. I think a lot of that just comes from a lack of sounds. You can kind of get away with skips like that if you just implement some heavy use of rest. Alright, I was going to say that was more straightforward than the first track, but honestly the first track was rather straightforward too. This was just more of a condensed version of it. The verses were no longer than 8 bars each, rather than the extended verse that we had in See Seaweed. I feel like the choruses were also about half as long. And so, You have a song that's half the length without honestly really doing anything. It's just a more condensed, focused version of what we saw. And we kind of view a lot of the same ideas here as well. The verse being a lighter, sparser, emptier sound that contrasts heavily with a larger idea in the chorus, a bridge that introduces some dissonance and plays around with a little bit of different composition writing. Well, we'll touch on that guitar solo in a second. And then bringing it back at the end. I think this one also, it doesn't go as hard though as I See Seaweed. And I think part of that is just that they wanted to keep something with more constrained highs versus lows, but also I think without the length, it would have felt unearned. Now, this begins to call into question when they decided to put the album list together versus when they made these songs. This could have been the first thing they written, and so they weren't thinking about this. But coming at it this way, you come off of a long epic like I See Seaweed and you feel it, you're really within that sound for so long, and so the ending has a lot of impact. Much like a good slow burn, it's more impactful because of the time you spend with it. This one being a bit shorter, a really big ending I don't think would have fit well, especially not coming off of I See Seaweed, which did it really well. It would have felt, I think, more a bit more obvious that the shorter length of this just doesn't really lean itself well to having a big bombastic ending. And so, regardless of what kind of thought went into it, I think this was the right direction to go, whether that's track ordering or composition of the song, however you want to look at it. Having it stay a bit smaller just works really well within this final version of the album. Now, there is one big change here. The guitar is less noise punk and more blues rock. I like it. I'm a sucker for a good blues guitar tone. I'm a sucker for a good blues rock guitar lick. It's the bends with the compression and the bite and the almost melodramatic negativity and bluesiness, the sorrowful element of the harmony. All of it just comes together into something that sounds great. I don't care how iterative it is, you're going to hook me with a solid blues rock guitar riff. And sure enough, as soon as that guitar comes in, I think towards the end of the first verse, leading us into that chorus, I was sucked in. I was so good. I love that. And I like how the guitar is actually used as a bit of counterpoint at times to the vocals through this lens. We don't really see too much of that on I See Seaweed. Everything was complementary to the vocals as a way of supporting it or creating an atmosphere for it. Here we got to see a little bit of counterplay between the two. I think that's simply because the guitar ends up taking a bit more of a lead idea on this track than we saw ever on I See Seaweed, other than the solo, which was devoid of vocal work. But it also introduces something else. If the guitar gets some focus, why not give it more? And so the chorus, to me, ends up being very guitar prominent, even I'd say outweighing the vocals in the mix, or at least tying with it, but also having attention deviated to it every couple of bars as we have that back and forth. It sounded awkward the first couple of times. I warmed up to it. Eventually, I do think it's very distracting, and maybe it's supposed to be, maybe that's the intention behind it. There's something about it being as present as it is in the mix, as loud as it is in the mix, and that constant back and forth, cutting from full sound to no sound, to full sound to no sound, because the other side's alternating the same way, is neat. It's a bit much by the end. And it's one of those things that maybe I just need more time with it, but I went on a really big roller coaster with that, with just these 4 minutes, and I think my final emotion was, yeah, we probably could have backed off from that a little bit. Maybe every other time through the 4-bar phrase of the chorus instead of every time. I don't know. It's It's like I said, it started out confusing and then interesting and then neat and then I'm done with this gimmick. I went through that whole thing in just 4 minutes. Um, but I do think that that is a part of the guitar taking more of a lead role in that verse and kind of wanting to adapt that into the chorus as well. I think it's kind of neat. I like the solo in the bridge for the most part. I don't know. I don't know how to interpret this. It starts out wonderful, and I think if I ignore the second guitar, is there a second guitar? I don't know. There's some notes in there. They're choices, that's for sure. It has to be deliberate. Again, we have showcases of this guitarist playing wonderfully cohesive, kind of cookie cutter bluesy rock stuff. The decision to pick these notes in the solo, it's not on accident. You don't just noodle around and land on this and leave it in. Especially when you show me that you know how to play this the traditional way. This is an intentional choice to deviate from the norm. And so I like the solo, I like the guitar tone. There's some moments in it though that just don't quite click with me. And part of that is my expectation of a more standardized bluesy rock thing going on here. But I think the other thing is that it's intentionally disruptive too. It doesn't really resolve the way you would expect, and part of that is because key notes where you expect to find the really strong notes of the chord that you're in are replaced with these weak tones that occasionally aren't even in the chord. It makes it so that functional harmony isn't really present at all. Sure, the chords outside the solo are presenting as functional harmony, which is just the idea is that within a key, certain chords have specific roles. They're either directive, in which they point somewhere, or they're strong and represent a key element of that chord, and they are where things point to. Typically falling under the ideas of tension and resolution. This kind of chucks most of that out the window. I'd say like 70% of this solo feels like it's based around functional ideas, and the other 30% is more avant-garde and experimental. And those just happen to land on places where you really want the strong presence of functional harmony there. And again, it feels very purpose-built. The moments when I need those strongest key tones are when he chooses to not play them. And so I think that with a couple of tweaks, this could be turned into a very good traditional cookie cutter bluesy rock solo. And that's why I say I like it. Underneath this, there's a really great idea, but it's purposefully mutated and perverted and twisted into this, into something disruptive. What's the point of that? Again, I don't know. It could represent a lot of things. I mean, it's the sheer concept of deviation of the norm. It's rebellion. That could be, that's a very generic idea that can be extrapolated into a lot of lyrical themes. How to See Through Fog is what the title's called, though. To me, the solo sounds like Walking Blind. Sometimes you step well, other times you miss a step. Trip over a curb, that kind of idea. The fog is preventing you from having a smooth trek, a smooth walk. But I find it interesting that the rest of the song doesn't really play around with dissonant harmony anywhere near as much as the first track did. This kind of comes out of nowhere and sucker punched me. Given how much I enjoyed the guitar work up to this point, it was very strange for me that the guitarist decided to not do what was expected. The atmosphere on this track is a little bit lighter of what we saw with See Seaweed. It's still heavy, it's still dreary, it's still melancholic. There's a bit of levity and brightness brought to it once again with that piano sound. That very plunky staccato piano tone, and again, a bit of a jazzier melody played in that. We had that fun bouncing rhythm at the beginning of the track that was incorporated into a little bit of the guitar work in the verses and the bass as well, but never really became a prominent part of the song like it was at the beginning in the lead in the piano as a lead melody. It's almost as if any sort of brightness against this darkness was eventually sucked into it and forgotten or overridden, or however you want to read that. It was tainted and sort of removed from vision, which it's called How to See Through Fog. But yeah, like I said, it goes for a lot of the same vibes and ideas that we saw in track one, but a more condensed idea, looking with a bluesier guitar sound in general, and going for more of a direct approach rather than an elongated exploration of a space. Let me find some lyrics on this, we'll see what's going on there. And here's another one I'm a little iffy on. It starts out describing a bunch of odd ideas. It says the marble moon sifts jets of sluice from treetops down candle wax roots, while rain towers drown the morning song, a magpie with a mottled tongue. From here we jump to the chorus. They only ever treat you well when you're nothing but a church bell. They only ever think you're good when you're walking like you're made of wood. Not sure how any of this clicks into place. The second verse. It's another Friday afternoon. You shuck the shell, peel the cocoon, but it ain't Friday on the moon like it ain't Kenya at the zoo. Then we go back to the chorus, different this time around. They only treat you well when you're walking on eggshells. They only treat you kind when you're talking like you'll change your mind. Both of the choruses make sense to me. It's a one-sided relationship where one part is trying to get the most out of the relationship. It wants the other person to be a very specific thing. I'm not entirely sure what the idea of is, being a church bell or walking like you're made of wood, but I definitely understand them treating you well while you're walking on eggshells. So while you're doing your best to please them and make them feel happy, and only treating you kind when they think they can change your mind. Basically, if you're not living for them, they'll want nothing to do with you. That makes sense. I'm kind of getting that same vibe from the first chorus as well, even if I'm less sure about those metaphors. The verses make absolutely no sense to me, though. It ends on a stanza that I'm equally confused about. It says, creation is all just a hit and run, limping to the beat of your own going numb. A fog curling tight around a weathercock fight, and an end to see you in hindsight. I don't know. I barely had an understanding of See Seaweed. I have no understanding on this at all, other than the idea that people as a whole can be kind of cruel and very self-centered, taking advantage of those who are less self-centered, less egotistical. What that has to do with any of the other stanzas, though, I have no idea. And what any of that would have to do with the bluesy rock sound on this one, I'm at a loss. Let's keep going. They'll Kill You is the next track. That sounds about right given the chorus of the last one. Let's see what's going on with this. Got a nice country twang. I like the slides, but there's those detune bends. Very interesting decision to do that.
resolution for New Year 2012. You would save till you made the carousel. And you'd be dumping all you ordered, 'cause they didn't mean more than a bunch of props on stage. You might even find some new ones after jetting off to Stockholm via Adelaide, where you'd rearrange your past to merge with each new twist that came.
I got brushes on the snare, that's
Or
nice.
You'd touch down, then you'd shut down and leave before you'd stay. Soothed only by a hope that the world wouldn't cope without you long.
Heavy
But
wavy
all
reverb.
plans are just on hold, I'm told, until your afterglow is gone. Everybody
I like the
shuts out
slow
front,
strumming.
waits there on the
What's
street.
being strummed is a bit more difficult to
Like
swallow,
some
but
postscript might ensure
the technique
whole
behind it is
thing
very
don't
nice.
repeat. Or give me back my upper hand. Or give me back my second chance. Or
It's
give
so
me
weird.
back
The guitars will do
evil
something that'll put a
streak.
little smirk on my face, and then he'll say something in such a gut-wrenching way. I'm like, I shouldn't be smiling.
Stays with me. Oh, everything you did just kept you, boy. And everywhere you wandered was a substitute, a decoy. Overdressed, overdrawn, volunteering last night's footprint on your face. You knew you were trespassing, 'cause you lied about your age to anybody that would hear you out. Oh, while all your smoke screens lean from range and train their way south. But this birdhouse migrates to and I don't think you'll ever find your way out of it now.
Ooh. Oh, there's some organ in here? Yeah.
Was a running away more a punishment than being hitched to the cart? Was it you that cracked my front door oh so softly in the dark?
A bit of a larger verse this time
Cold
through.
like the shore that you hit and sunk. But you were here signed and sealed just as real as any air left in your lungs. But you weren't fooling anyone. Or some might say your trail's as hard to read as any snakes. I knew you last and least on earth, but no one else must fake by making all that she made worth.
Yeah. That lick down here underneath this growing intensity. Dude, that went by fast. Yeah, I mean, they're definitely laying down a standard feel here. We're almost halfway done with the album, and all the songs so far have been lighter, sparser, still heavy in atmosphere and vocal delivery, but just less layered verses, followed by large, impactful, weighty choruses, all mostly working with darker, depressive, bluesier, melancholic sounds. We have a vocalist who is consistently really leading into a phenomenal delivery of these words, really impassionate, and well, at least two songs here with some bluesier guitar work. The first one stuck with more of a punkier, noisier vibe, but yeah, all three of these songs are very similarly linked, though. At least as far as structure blueprint and compositional palette, the order of things, the way that instruments get used. We are seeing a little bit of a change of timbre, though. I don't think we had organ on either of the first two tracks. We didn't have the blues guitar on the first one, so we're getting a little bit of these changes. I don't think we heard piano on this one, but we definitely had piano on the first two. So there is some variety in what will and won't get used from track to track. I think that's pretty cool. I enjoy that. I was tempted to just run this into the next song since it's another short one, but I opted not to because there's a couple of things I wanted to point out on this one, and hopefully I wouldn't forget them. The first being that guitar solo. That's the sort of bluesy guitar work I was expecting to hear on the solo for the last track. Very straightforward in its harmonic consonants. A couple of dips here and there into things more tense, but ultimately sticking with that consonant sound, staying in key, landing on the notes I expect it to go towards based on the chord progression we have. Yeah, rather straightforward. It left the noisy bits for the end of the song when we had that really gritty build up and we had the two guitars sort of having this conversation with each other. Um, but I think that's interesting too because the beginning of this song told me something else. We had all those detuned bends on the guitar. It's like, oh, this is going to be a very dissonant one. It's what they're setting us up for. Right from start, we're having all this harmonic tension here, and we never really revisited that. Bends, sure. Microtonal stuff with detuning, no, that's the kind of tension that we saw on track two that started off with more consonant blues guitar playing that made me think they were going to stick to something a bit more traditional. So I think it's interesting that they sort of psyched me out on both of these tracks here, presenting me with a sound at the beginning that I accepted as the de facto mode of how they were going to be composing, and they subverted both times once we got to the bridge and explored something opposing to how I was introduced to a sound. I'm curious if that was intentional on like an album scope of things, or if it's just how things lined up. Um, I'm kind of hoping I can get a little bit more of an understanding of the lyrics this time around. I'm not banking on it. They've been writing stuff that's gone over my head. We're two for two on that so far. So I'm not expecting me to just magically start to grasp what's going on, but I am really curious why this is the one that would have a consonant guitar solo in it. Although, like I mentioned, that's only one part of the equation. We do end the song with heavy dissonance and tension and sonic clashing. There's just a lot of noise there at the end with the two guitars and the organ and the bass. The drums were starting to play a bit more than usual. It was just a very noisy section, and then two guitars were focusing on dissonance, particularly the right guitar. The left guitar gave us some really cool licks that kind of sat under the noise. So I kind of liked how all that ended up working out, and it's cool to sort of hear their conversation. That's the word I keep coming back to. It's not necessarily a call and response, though we do have that in here, and it's actually cool to see that piggybacking off the call and response we had on track two in the chorus. But there's also more of this harmonious collaboration where they'll both play the same lick and then deviate a little bit from it. The right one goes into some noisier ideas, the left one goes for some licks, and then you sort of line back up for these unified moments, and we'll get 5, 6 notes out of that, and they'll deviate and go their own way again. And I just really love that. That mixed with the call and response and just kind of bouncing back and forth between those two ideas made it feel rather human and alive, very organic. It was a very cool way to write interplay between these two instruments that worked within the larger atmosphere as well. It all comes together into this marvelous work of art that I thought was pretty cool. Now, one instrument I don't think I've brought up at all today. I mean, we're an hour into this, and I don't think I've even mentioned it in passing, is the drums. There's just not a lot to the drum work on this album. A lot of it sort of sits in the same realm that I would place doom metal. The tracks are a bit slower tempo wise. The drummer does not choose to put a lot of emphasis in between key impactful notes, which tend to be alternating beats. I don't think we've had a single song where the drummer's accenting every beat. And so the space between the beats is already pretty large, and since we're alternating accents, the space between the accents is even larger than that. The drums are often relegated to the background. As I mentioned, we have possibly steel brushes on this one, giving us some flourishy sounds on the snare between the accented hits of the bass kick. We have very sparse cymbal work. Even when we get into the large, heavy moments, the drums retain this same sparseness, just bringing up the intensity, possibly switching out the brushes for drumsticks, because I think I hear full-bodied snare hits at the end of the track. But again, there's not a lot of playing between the heavy hits. You might get a bass kick averaging out one per beat, a snare every other beat, cymbal work once every beat or two. It's all very sparsely laid out, designed particularly, I think, to represent the slowness, the lethargy of the tempo in these tracks, while still providing a bit of that metronomic backbone of creating that rhythmic flow in the songs. It's not designed to be flashy. It's not really designed to draw your attention to it ever. Maybe there were some more busy sections in the first two tracks that I missed, but I really paid attention to them on this track, and they are totally foundational, completely in the background, designed to serve a purpose of rhythm, and that is it. They, as far as I can see it, they play the bare minimum of what is necessary to keep the tempo going without being boring. Because like you can just hit the snare on every beat and you have a tempo, but now you are literally just a metronome. That's not... exciting's the wrong word, but it's not complex enough, it's not nuanced enough. There needs to be just a little bit of amount of dynamic elements to it. And so we have bass, we have snare, we have hi-hat. I think we have some crash cymbal in the bigger sections, a little bit of tom work here and there, but really not a lot of that. Again, like I said, it's really designed to be as minimalistically present in the mix as possible without being too boring. And I think it does it well. It stands behind everything, supports it. I think we would definitely notice it if it wasn't there, but we don't necessarily notice it when it is there. It's very much like background music to, a background score to a film. If it was silent, you'd notice it, but because it's well done, it's sort of invisible. And I think that's where the drums sit for me on this one. Usually drums are something I'm always keen to check in on, and here I just kind of forgotten about it. That's a rare thing for me. Let me hit some lyrics on this. We'll see what's going on there. I'm not entirely sure about the ending to this, but I'm picking up on the main idea here a lot better than the other tracks. This is about a person who doesn't know what to do with their life and is kind of lost, and instead of meeting that head on, decides to run away and search for meaning elsewhere under the delusion of they're trying to find themselves. Says your resolution for the new year 2012, you would save till you made the carousel, and you'd be dumping all that you hoarded because they didn't mean more than a bunch of props on stage. You might even find some new ones after jetting off to Stockholm via Adelaide. So, you went to Stockholm, you got on a plane, you left everything behind, and even the stuff that you were hoarding, I think, which is just a way of saying the things that you owned at home, you got rid of them. Says it didn't really mean much more than just props in your life, so. But you'll probably pick some more up after this journey's over. Says you'd rearrange your past to merge with each new twist that came. You'd touch down, then you'd shut down, then leave before you stayed. God, that's so good. Basically saying reinventing yourself by also reinventing your past, possibly making things up since no one around you knows who you are anymore. You are a complete blank slate and you can make up who you are and I don't know, maybe even try to live that lie. Maybe it becomes truthful after you've said it enough. It says every place that you would go, you would touch down. So you would have victory. You would go out on a town and have drinks, just have a fantastic time, and then you would shut down. You'd crash out for a few days. And then you would leave before you'd stayed. Never even got a chance to become part of this area, to fully understand it, to become known in any way, to hang out with any locals, to develop friends, to put down any roots. You'd be gone before you could even make this a part of yourself. It's 4 lines. It's so good. It says you were soothed only by a hope that the world wouldn't cope without you long, but all plans are just on hold, I'm told, until your afterglow is gone. This idea that you're hoping that someone calls you, hey, we miss you when you coming back home, but no one ever does. Kind of hold out hope for that. And you tell yourself, all my plans, the real stuff, whatever that is, getting into my career or pursuing knowledge, education, whatever would really be pushing my life forward, that's all on hold. Right now, I just need to discover myself. And when this starts getting boring, that's when I'll go do that again. It's so well written. Later on says everything you did just kept you buoyed. You're basically just staying afloat through all of this. And everywhere you wandered was a substitute, a decoy, overdressed, overdrawn. Volunteering last night's footprints on your face, you knew you were trespassing because you lied about your age to anyone that would hear you out, while all your smokescreen leaned from range and drained their way south. This birdhouse migrates too, and I don't think you'll ever find your way out of it now. There's a lot going on here, and I'd be lying if I said I caught all of it. But the idea is that through all of this adventure, it wasn't really to find yourself. You were running away from your problems, running away from your future. It was a way of procrastinating in a very expensive way, mind you, and one that has a veneer of uh, philosophical elements. You went off to find yourself, but of course, you're just going out partying every night, right? You touch down, then you shut down, then you leave. Find another place to do it. And so nothing that you're doing here is ever worthwhile. As it says, you just wandered from one substitute to another. But I really love the end. It says this birdhouse migrates too. It isn't just the bird who leaves the house. The house, the baggage, everything that you are comes with you. You can't escape that. If you are dealing with anxiety or depression or stress, you don't just leave that at home when you decide to go across the world. That comes with you. And so none of this ever went the way you thought it would. These nights just ended up with you finding a different way to cope, to push things aside, to not deal with it. You just did it in a different city than where you were born or where you were living, whatever. It wraps up. This person comes back home And our narrator confronts them, says, "Was running away more a punishment than being hitched to the cart? Was it that you cracked my front door oh so softly in the dark? I've been sleeping most nights. But you were here, signed and sealed, just as real as any air left in your lungs. But you weren't fooling anyone. Your trail's as hard to read as any snake. I knew you last and least on earth, but no one outsmarts fate by making all that she made worse." This is the part I'm confused about. There is a bit of judgment here. The narrator says, "Was all that worth it? You know, you've come right back where you are, and I don't see any difference, but like I said, I knew you last and least. I'm not really that big of a fan of you. But no one outsmarts fate by making all that she made worse." I don't get that line. Unless the idea here is just that if you're fated to deal with this, you can't avoid that and come out on top of it. You're still going to have to deal with all this stuff you left behind. You're just delaying it. Maybe that's what it's talking about. I don't know. But like I said, I had a bit better of a read on this one, which I also find confusing. It's the only one so far that we haven't had any genius annotations on, and it's the one that I got. Maybe that's why there's no annotations. It's just a bit more apparent. That makes sense to me. Although by that reasoning, no one would ever annotate anything. Well, it's obvious to me. I don't need to tell anyone else what's going on here. I don't know if I'd say that's my favorite song musically. I think that still goes to track 1. But lyrically, I mean, if the rest of the songs are like this and I'm just missing it, that's awesome. But there's so much nuance in here, and the metaphor it's just fantastic. You know, some of this stuff is very potent for being done in so few lines. There's venom to the vocabulary. It is. I wish I could get this ecstatic about everything else. It's just right over my head. All right. Track 4. This is the middle of the album, although not lengthwise, I don't think. So all the long songs are in the back half. A moat you can stand on. Stand in. Okay. Let's see what's going on here. As soon as I bring up the drums, I mean, it is a straightforward beat, but it's more animated than any of the other drum patterns I remember. Somewhere harmonically in the middle of like hardcore punk and classic rock. Really interesting combo there.
She's down to tabloid floors, and I'll be up in the key, making toast to some queen. While I'm stripping down to my spawn, I can stand in your mood. I can stand in your mood. Hey, I can stand in your mood. Yeah, your research proves that it's fair to see insults as a nothing but sneer.
These two guitars have been cooperating so well, it's almost jarring to hear them separate to their own ideas. From organ rundown in the middle of all that noise. Yeah, pretty straightforward song there. A lot of chordal stuff going on. Not a lot of lead guitar work. We got the vocals, which are very energetic and driving. I think this is paired well against the high energy guitar work. We don't have the same sound that we've been exploring with the small verse, big chorus. This is sort of even throughout the entire song. What I think is interesting is that the guitars and drums and bass sort of present a very punk sound right from the get-go, but when you listen to the chord progression, it feels a bit more classic rock. And it's wild to sort of hear the song morph between these two ideas. I guess primarily just because the punkier side is noisier and the classic rock side's more melodic, and it's interesting to listen to the song wrestle and grapple with this duality here. It is definitely an atmospheric, intense, texture-based song, but there is a chord progression underneath that feels a bit, not necessarily light-hearted, but less aggressive anyways. To me, that's the core identity of this track, other than the flat sound of kind of retaining a uniform intensity throughout. It's that struggle of trying to be punkier and noisier, but a bit more clean around the edges. I don't think there's anything else I really want to bring up on this. You know, the drums are more energetic, they fit, but they're still kind of standard. There's no expressiveness to them. Nothing that I would say is distinct to this drummer, whoever they may be. It's a very straightforward drum patterns. Although I do think it's funny. I just got done talking about how the drummer kind of sits in the background, and this is the first song so far that kicks off with drums. Very in your face. We get a little bit of the pattern itself, and then a quick drum fill into the first verse. The guitars, vocals, everything kicks in. I thought that was kind of funny. I do like the guitar duality in this. A lot of the times the two guitars are working together to do the same idea, just really do it in a big way, combining their sounds. I thought it was interesting then when we hit the bridge and they deviated and did their own things, sort of separating out the melodic playing, which I think was on the left, and the noisier playing, which was pushed out to the right. And of course we brought all that back together. I still think that that is the heart of this, is struggling, battling a duality of opposition. With my luck, the lyrics aren't about that at all, but that's what the music says to me. It's the only thing that really stands out. The bass and drums are just rather straightforward, punky rock stuff. The vocals are what he's been doing this whole time. Not really anything different there. I do think it's interesting him putting the rasp, that little bit of grit on the vocals towards the end, something that I have found to be emotionally resonant in some of the past works, but here just feels like a texture to change things up. I don't really get that passionate sound out of it. I think a lot of that then isn't necessarily his delivery, though it is fantastic, but it's also the atmosphere, and this just lacks the weight to rip that emotion out of it. And by itself, it sort of I guess it's just it's a malleable sound. It can sound aggressive, it can sound emotional, it can sound defeated, and it's just going to depend on the atmosphere around it. And the atmosphere of this song doesn't really pull any emotion out at all. At least not for me. Like I said, the vocal just ends up becoming a texture of some of the last choruses, and I feel like it's an odd choice there, especially given how emotional it's been used in the past few tracks. That's the last short song on the album. We're gonna check out the a 7 minute song, two sixes and a nine. That's gonna be our last four tracks on this. So these little 4 minute interludes after the longer songs, that's over. It's just four longer tracks straight through. Let me read some lyrics on this one, and we'll push forward into track 5, Nine Eyes, which I really hope that song's about surveillance. Because, I mean, maybe Nine Eyes means other things in other disciplines, but I immediately read that as Big Brother, government surveillance. Now, I don't quite understand the metaphor, I can stand in your moat. I thought I might have had some idea of it at the beginning of the track, but as the song went on, I found it meant less to me. It starts off and it begins about people who will, as it says, they'll slap you on the face with their glove, they'll dip you in the pitcher of their bloodshot love. Look at 'em standing staid in their ridiculous robes, while I stand in your moat. Have you ever thought that all their disdain was just a saucer-eyed child shrinking from the food chain? All their disapproving Good Friday fixed grins were effortlessly wrong about most everything. The idea here is that the narrator is speaking to someone else. I don't think it's anyone in particular, though it might be someone specific. That specific person is just a stand-in for everyone. And it's a question of, who do you keep in your life? Do you keep people who are just going to push you down in hopes that as they climb some ladder, they'll drag you up with them? Because, as he states, most of these people are just shrinking on the food chain themselves. As the saying goes, once you reach the top, you're kind of alone. You're the only one up there. As you climb any ladder, there's less and less people that continue that climb with you. Someone has to be left behind. Most likely, statistically, it's going to be you. And so we go stanza after stanza after stanza after stanza. There's like 20 stanzas in this, which I think is wild for as short of a song as it is, 4.5 minutes. There are a lot of lyrics in this track, but all of it speaks to how terrible these people are. They have absolutely no shame. Nothing is too terrible for them to do in order to get a little bit ahead. And we can see in the final stanza, it says, don't let them abuse you, don't let them use you, like a saddle for their high, high horse. If life means more to you than a grave with a view, then it probably means you're on course. The idea here is, don't take their abuse just because you hope it'll get you a little bit higher up the ladder. Because at the end of the day, death comes for us all, and maybe you'll get a grave with a view, but what we all find isn't that much different on the other side. Now, who these people are, it goes through quite a few stanzas explaining how they are the powerful, how they're the religious, how they're the pious, how they're the morally right. Anybody who feels that they have some sort of up above someone else, how they're just a little bit better than someone else. That's these kinds of people. However, towards the very end of the song, we see a very direct line. It says, they'll tell you while they conjure your plight. All of them, old men, just line their pockets with fear, then make you greedy when your money gets tight. It's the old men in power. That's who this song is mostly directed at. Don't allow yourself to become disillusioned with trying to become like the rich people in power. You're not going to. You're always going to be a stepping stone for them. You're a useful tool until you're not. And so if you have any sort of pride in yourself, if you have anything more that you want out of your life than to have a nice view from your gravestone, you won't ally yourself or surround yourself with these types of people. You'll be better than that. That's what the song amounts to. But I still don't understand I can stand in your moat. I had an idea of being in the surrounding area. You're not inside the castle walls, you're in the moat. But what does that mean? If you allow these people into, through your defenses, and I'm on the outside, like, yeah, I understand how that fits with everything, but what's the point of standing in the moat? Why couldn't we have the song, I can stand outside your perimeter? I guess it doesn't have a nice ring to it. I don't know. It's an interesting phrase. I suppose we can just end with that. All right. 9 eyes. Let's see what's going on here.
I took a strangely disembodied walk down memory lane to the home of my late mother.
I like those harmonics, but I'm not too big of a fan of the detuned warbliness.
The full glare of a hot LCD sun, I rode 99 Survivor Street View like the last of the liquidators before lights out, or the first return to Pripyat. My nine-eyed scout, it wasn't at all distressing.
He says it's not distressing, as this is a very tense, distressing section. The bass, the guitars, everything's creating a lot of
I'm all I need, I'm finally on my own. Hey, I'm all I need, I'm finally on my own. Hey, I'm all I need, I'm finally on my own. Hey, I'm all I need, I'm finally on my own. And everything was just like I remembered it to be.
I love the vocal harmony. It's an interesting dyad, but I like the texture layering. I really wish it was in a song that was less noisy, though, which is probably a big ask for them.
That's my name in the cup, my number on the letterbox, my goldfish appeared in touch. I learned to ride my bike here, I learned the golden rule, but they forgot what it was, which suits me fine. I like things being elliptical.
We have some bells here. Yeah, so even more texture layering on that.
When I
interesting because I think the higher vocal fits well with what the guitars and bass are laying down. The lower vocals are the one that seem out of place. That's that interesting dyad that's being created. More very interesting note choices given the chords. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I think the core of the song, the verse, is well. Let me subjectively. I think the verse is fine. The bass and the guitars lay down a general vibe and feeling. Once again, kind of having more of a sparse composition versus a more layered and filled out chorus. What we saw on pretty much everything except track 4. We're returning to that type of form. And I think that generally it works here. The vocals have always been in an interesting sound, generally, as far as what notes and pitches they're choosing to play alongside the chords. The chords are generally either vague, looking at just, 3 notes, or dissonant and noisy, which is kind of clashing harmonically anyways, that the vocalists can kind of get away with anything. And honestly, the vocals haven't been super, what would be the term for it? I don't necessarily want to say technically proficient, but pitch perfect maybe would be the proper term for it. The vocalist has played around with sort of just being slightly out of tune, a little flat, a little sharp, has hit notes and then either drop the pitch down or raise the pitch up to get more in tune with the note after they've hit the tone. Maybe they're like, oh, I'm a little flat right here, so let me bring it up. Maybe it's just intentional entirely. They wanted that little bit of movement, and it really didn't matter where they landed. They were planning on moving up anyways, even if that was spot on and then going a little sharp. Regardless, the vocals have been very, like I said, they're just not pitch perfect, whether that's done entirely on purpose or if the vocalist just doesn't have that type of singing capability. Doesn't really matter. The end result is that the vocals are kind of a little loose as far as harmony goes. It's been fine though. As I said, the guitars aren't really laying down these really dense, defined chords. It's not like we're in jazz with like flat nines or something like that, giving us these really large defined stacks of chords that you really have to sing perfectly in, or it's going to sound terrible. And then, like I said, the guitars play noisy sometimes, anyways, and you can really sing whatever you want then, and it doesn't sound bad at all. So it hasn't really been something that's bothered me much. It's been fine enough without being completely out of tune at times, um, and it just has a general sort of raw punkiness to it that I think works rather well for the style of music they're making. But we do have a second vocalist in here, and that vocalist seems to be, well, their pitch is a bit more consistent. I don't know if it is perfect, but the thing is that their sense of melody writing is very different from the main vocalists, and this creates a really interesting a tension, a push and pull in the song, in the chorus, when both are singing. They're not singing the exact same notes. Let me lay down something real quick for you. A chord progression doesn't really have a lot of flavor to it. It's more, especially if you're working with just stacks of 3 notes. Maybe you're doing dyads, maybe you're doing black metal stuff, and you're just working with stacks of 2 notes. That's not really defined. When you figure a key is anywhere from 5 to 7, sometimes 8 notes, only choosing 2 or 3, well, those 3 notes can show up in multiple keys then. So it doesn't really define a sound. What really does is putting the melody on it. The melody is going to be singing 4, 5, 6 different pitches depending on how fast you're singing and or how long you're holding out these chords on top of the chord. And when you pull in the 2 to 3 notes from your chord plus the 5, 6, 7 pitches from your vocal melody, you can piece all that together and figure out the key. That's where a lot of your information comes from. Different people can make the same chord progression emotionally feel very different depending on what kind of melody they put on top of that. And that's not true just for vocals, it's true for any melody. Your melody is going to define an emotion and even an atmosphere at times just as much as your chord progression is going to. They really, like a solo melody isn't really going to define much either. It's really the combination of your melody and your chords that creates the emotional resonance of a section or the atmosphere. And so what I want to point out here is that the two vocalists have very different note choices that are alluding to 2 different chords. And to me, there's a lot of clashing of intention here. Are we supposed to understand this as a type of duality? Is that a core part of this, where we're supposed to simultaneously and separately hear these 2 chords? Or is it just a case that the 2 vocalists are just singing whatever feels right to them with this chord progression, and they happen to have 2 different directions to it, and they just said, that's fine. When it comes to music like this, it's really difficult to judge or even infer intent. Is this all dissonant and difficult to listen to? And, are the pitches a bit off? And do we have this dual key thing going on because of incompetence or artistic integrity? At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Punk sounds great because these people picked up a guitar and just started jamming away. Their lack of musical knowledge actually led them to creating one of the most high intensity and passionate sounding music of its time. So I don't really like to judge, but I am intrigued about it as a composer, as someone who likes to peer behind the curtain and see how the magic is made. I'm curious what's going on here. And, listening to this, I don't know. The lower vocals are telling me one story, the higher vocals are telling me another, and the atmospheres they're creating are clashing. It's not like 2 colors that are complementary to each other. we're kind of smashing colors together that don't mesh well, and it's creating something that feels very awkward to me. The chorus is just a very awkward idea altogether because of that. If that higher vocal isn't there, honestly, I don't think I'd have anything to say about the chorus. It would be very similar to the rest of the choruses. But because of that inclusion, the inclusion of a second melodic line that pulls from different notes than the primary, it's an interesting little idea. One that subjectively I wasn't a big fan of, but it's interesting. And like I said, I'm kind of curious how that all came to be. Now, the other thing that I wasn't a real big fan of here is also intonation and pitches and the entire guitar solo at the end. I don't need to go into too much depth on here. Much like I See Seaweed, this is a song where the guitarist seems to intentionally just play every single wrong note, except this time we are including a lot of sounds, not really pitches, but different types of chirps and squeals and compression and all sorts of dissonant tones that can be created with the guitar without actually aiming for a specific pitch. It is a very noisy ending to a song, and I guess that's about it. I don't usually pick least favorites. Um, when I listen to an album, I document it in my spreadsheet and I like to list what my favorite track was alongside my general notes and thoughts about the album. I try not to be too negative on it. I don't like to have like a worst song, but this is the other four songs I wouldn't mind listening to again. I don't think this type of music is my cup of tea, but I'm getting some enjoyment out of it. I think they're doing some really impactful things. The lyrics to track three were pretty awesome. The music and atmosphere to track one absolutely sucked me in. But Nine Eyes, this is definitely my least favorite so far. It leans a little bit too much into the noisy, dissonant composition. It doesn't balance it out as much as other songs have tried to toe the line between melodic and consonant harmony, and their more dissonant, noisier sections. All right, lyrics. I'm glad I had some annotation help on this one. Nine Eyes is pertaining to the 9 camera lenses on a Google Maps Street View car that drives around and captures pictures everywhere. The idea here is, well, as it states at the beginning, I took a strangely disembodied walk down memory lane to the home of my late mother and my youth. Under the full glare of a hot LCD sun, I rode nine-eyed survivor Street View. He basically used Google Maps to explore his old hometown. He mentions how it's strangely disembodying. You're not actually making this walk, you're viewing a digital representation of it. He says, everything was just like I remembered. I spied through all the windows and surveyed the lawns, but what kind of asshole drives this lime green Commodore? Speaking about a car that is in the driveway of his old home. Says he ain't got no right to be here. That's my name on the curb, my gold on the letterbox, my goldfishy being interred. Basically saying this is my past, this is my history. What are you doing here in my memories? I think that's really interesting. Returning to a place that you've long left, that all of your connections to have left, a childhood home that has been sold, purchased by a new family. That's it's a strange feeling. I don't know if anyone else, I don't think I've had the animosity that he's putting on right here, but it's definitely weird. Um, I used to drive by my grandmother's house. Um, I don't think I've done that in about a decade or so, but I used to have to pass by it to go somewhere that I went weekly, and I took that route rather than one a bit more direct just to see the house again. And it was always really weird to see different flowers in the lawn up front, different cars in the driveway, eventually even a different paint scheme on the house. It's what I remember, kind of, but different. And that's a very strange, weird feeling of nostalgia, but mixed with a lack of connection. What does that even mean? Do we have a word for that? Anyways, the chorus says, I'm all I need. I'm finally on my own. I don't know if this is supposed to be said sarcastically, maybe tongue-in-cheek. But he moved away from this place and presumably living on his own now, and he feels complete through that. Or maybe he puts on a display of feeling complete. But I like this next line. He says, I took all that I wanted when I was here before, but now I'm back to loot what's left. I can't get in the door. I guess I need to know if it'll be safe here on my own. But who's this dude living here now calling my house his home? You know, I like this. He says that he's back to loot what's left. There's nothing physical there. Everything is emotional. He's come back for a little bit of nostalgia, a walk down memory lane. Except it's not matching up to his memories anymore, and he's meeting this division of emotion that I was talking about. That's pretty much the whole song. I mean, eventually he just kind of shuts the computer down and goes to bed. Yeah. I've never really noticed this schism of emotion with this specific phenomenon. Returning to somewhere that's been rebuilt, or a childhood house, someone else lives there now. An old strip mall that's been redone, updated, not quite as run down as it used to be. New stores, nothing that you used to visit still there. You can't hold on to the past, but sometimes you can't even revisit it. Schism, division, expectation versus reality. There is clashing dualities happening in all of these descriptions. I wonder if that's the vocal harmony in the chorus, if that's the dissonant guitar work towards the end. It's a clashing of expectation. I don't know. Track 6, The Gray Leader.
Gray leader now speak.
Quite a busy layering with the bass, the piano, both guitars all doing different things.
Of the past. And there'll soon be a day where it's all disarray, and who'll know what to do with the past. And they'll say I was wrong, I was right all along, although nothing would ever change your mind.
Oh, interesting, like a musical, big, powerful movement, but full of angst.
Sucks you clear of the sun. The grey leader forsakes about all that he speaks. Through the spyglass he holds back to front, and he's stricken his ship on a taxiderm dog, and the whole crew's for sale if you want. And he'll say that I'm wrong and be right all along, as long as custom dictates wrong and right. The good times
Very interesting atmosphere on this. That initial chord of tension resolves quickly into a more prog rock progression.
Ain't nothing would ever change your mind. Nothing would ever change your mind. Nothing would ever change your mind. Quantities, real monsters have manners at sea. They talk law and order, be very discreet, while they kick the score down the street. You don't make peace with God, they always go along. It's all love and a misunderstanding. You open the cage and the birds flew away. And if you need any proof, it's still up on the roof. Oh, yeah. Ain't nothing would ever change your mind. Nothing would ever change your mind.
It's interesting. It's melancholic through and through, but it's so quick to change what's accompanied with that.
Your mind.
I find that interesting about the endings. Most of the songs just end with a fade out, but there are a handful that have decided to go for a noisy ending, and every single time I think, well, this is the one. that smoothly connects to the next track, and it never is. They always end by the end of it. It just never really seems like there's a natural movement towards silence. It's a constant level of noise, and then just at a certain point, one or two of those noisy sounds will dissipate, leaving just a very sparse last sound that fades itself out. It's sort of an abrupt ending, and we saw it there. We saw it, Moat You Can Stand In, I believe. Maybe They'll Kill You also had that. It's it's a decision they continue to make. Just it almost feels like when they don't want to end it with a fade out or end it with any sort of natural resolution, they just create noise and eventually just cut it off. But like I said, every single time I'm like, this is the one that crosses over, and now always 2 seconds to go, we end up cutting to silence. Now, the Gray Leader lines up with A Moat You Can Stand In as a song that is rather consistent throughout. We do have highs and lows, but they are much greatly condensed compared to some of the other songs. And I would even say that the playing, the what the guitars are playing, what the drums are playing, is rather consistent throughout. For being one of their longer songs at over 6 minutes long, I feel like it had less variety in it than How to See Through Fog, which was only 4 minutes long. It's interesting how they decided to go this route and just work within this atmosphere. Although I suppose, to be fair, the last 45 seconds was noise, so it's really only 5.5 minute song, which I guess makes it a little less absurd. But even a 5 minute song based on one foundation, you really got to do a lot to keep that interesting. And I think they do, primarily because the song is melancholic. It's very heavy. It has a rather straightforward chord progression and drum pattern as the foundation, but it's everything that sits above that, I think, that makes this interesting. What gets paired with the melancholy, and it's frequently moving at such a rapid pace. In fact, the chorus itself, the first chord of the chorus is dissonant, it's noisy, it's tense, and the second chord pretty much alleviates 70% of that, lightens it up quite a bit, and the next two chords clear it up almost entirely. There's parts of this chorus that feel very much like classic rock. Not in sonic representation. This is still noisier. I'd put this on the area of, I don't know, indie rock or punk somewhere too. I guess this whole album sort of has that punky, high compression, high distortion, kind of we do what we want, we make noise kind of thing. Noise rock actually would be another classification I'd probably put this under. But harmonically, yeah, the chorus goes from noise to consonant, semi bluesy guitar stuff real quick. And it's a rapid change, really rapid. We'll hear in the verse a bit more focus on consonant movement, particularly between the two guitars, one primarily playing chords, the other one accompanying the chords and occasionally putting in a little punctuating lick at the end of a 4-bar phrase or something. It's interesting to hear everything work together positively for so much of the song, and then at other moments the entire track breaks down entirely. We also have that noisy moment after the second chorus, I think it was, where it just devolves into white noise. We have moments of silence, even, where almost nothing happens except the hum of the guitars, and the vocals have to come in and break that. It's interesting to hear so much fluctuation in execution of a single vision. As I mentioned, the song is just melancholic, but is it noisy melancholy? Is it bluesy melancholy? Is it stressful, anxious melancholy? Is it pensive thoughtfulness melancholy? And the song jumps between these so quickly. It never wants to sit on any one specific idea. It almost feels like whatever was it, How to See Through Fog? I'm trying to think of which song was about the person who went on a journey of self discovery, but was honestly just trying to run away from anything. And the rapidness of anytime something cropped up, just do something different. That's kind of what I get here, too. An attempt to obscure the truth with newness, with freshness, with novelty. It's really difficult to fully digest anything in this song because it's ready to move to the next idea almost as soon as you've heard the last one. It just dawned on me that a lot of these song titles aren't descriptive of the songs, at least for me. I'm sure once you listen to the songs a bit more and you look down, oh, that's this track, and you start to tie the names to the tracks, but how does See Through Fog? I'm trying to think of even the lyrics for that song, and I can't. That title just means nothing compared to what I heard in the music for track two. They'll Kill You. I don't. The Moat You Can Stand In, I think, is the only one that really stands out to me as one that I just remember everything based off of that. Yeah, these titles are wild. I don't know why I'm having such a tough time pairing them to something I've heard before. I think that's about it for this track, though. Rather straightforward. I'm curious how they're going to wrap this up, though. The next one just being 6 minutes, I wager is going to be like this. It's going to be rather straightforward and either works on being a bit of a flatter dynamic song or going back to I See Seaweed, the idea of really high highs and really low lows. Those are the two forms they've been fluctuating between, but track 8 being 9 minutes long, they have a lot of space to work with stuff. Although I also am assuming we're going to have a lengthy intro and a lengthy outro on that, reducing the core song probably to somewhere in the 7.5, 8 minute range. That would be my guess, though. It is the outro track, so I'm expecting a rather lengthy outro on it. Let's find some lyrics for the Gray Leader, and then we'll push into track 7. And this song is about a leader with a silver tongue who has manipulated and coerced a bunch of people to follow his word over anyone else's. People so stuck into this mindset that even when confronted with the truth, they refuse to believe it. At one point, and they'll say I was wrong, but I was right all along, although nothing would ever change your mind. The truth doesn't matter. You already know what's right and wrong. That's even brought up later on as we return back to this chorus. It says, and he'll say that I'm wrong, and he'll be right all along as custom dictates wrong and right. Again, it's not about truth. It's about custom. It's about how things are done. It's about who controls truth. It's about a leader who gets everyone else to do what he wants, regardless of whether it's good for anyone. It says, and there'll soon be a day where it's all disarray, and who knows what'll do with the parts. The idea that everything will fall apart one day and no one will really understand why or how to fix it. We'll just be in this disarray. That's another part that I wanted to bring up. They talk law and order, but they're very discreet, while the big kick the small down the street. He doesn't make peace with God. They always got along. It's all love and a misunderstanding. This idea that he is right because he's just, and he's just because he's right. And through this, they can do whatever they want, because it will always be morally or religiously correct. And so, when those in power end up kicking down those at the lower rank, that's just how things are. They deserved it anyways, didn't they? I like this one line. He says, nothing here changes except quantities. I love that. The status quo, how everything is layered up, that doesn't really change. The poor are poor, the rich are rich, those with power have power, and those who don't. Static ideas. There is no changing of those. However, those who are powerful may get more powerful. Those who are poor may end up with less money. Those quantities will change. But the way that things are set up, completely static. Said all of that in 2 lines. Just so good. But I like the end. It says he opened the cage and the bird flew away. And if you need any proof, he's still up on the roof. Though I know nothing would ever change your mind. The proof is right there. You don't even really have to seek it out. It's right in your face. And you still don't care. The pure frustration delivered in that line. I don't even remember how he said it. The words themselves sound frustrated. And I absolutely love that. Now, I feel a uniform. Well, actually, I don't. I was going to say I feel a uniform emotion here, but there is a bit of variety to it, isn't it? It is melancholic. It's the sad state of events kind of idea, but there is frustration, there is anger, there's sorrow to this, but I think there's also a giving up. Why try if no one's going to change the way they think anyways? No one's looking for truth. They're looking for justification. They're looking to be right, to tell other people, I told you so. It doesn't matter how they get to being right. They just can't let their ego, or their ego won't let them be someone who says, I was wrong. And so even when faced with the truth, they can't admit it that. And so there is sadness to that. But I also totally understand the narrator's lack of caring almost. There are certain parts in this song where the lines are delivered with such bite, such ferocity, and other parts where it's just like, nah, that's just the way it is. There's no point fighting against the tide. All we can do is wait for everything to fall apart. I'll say I told you so. You'll tell me that I never mentioned anything like this, and then we'll try to push forward. But there's no use fighting it anymore because no one cares. No one cares for the truth. Yeah, I can see how all that works into the music. 2 tracks left to go. Oh, a quick little thing here. I normally do this around the middle of shorter albums like this. I say short like it's lengthwise short. It's just got a short number of tracks on it. But I like to get a little bit of background information on the group. And I think the reason I haven't really thought about that is because I've got a pretty good understanding of what they're doing, who they are, what kind of music they want to make. They're not, they haven't really obscured any of that where I've been confused. After like track 2, they've pretty much hit all my expectations going forward. But they're an Australian band that rose to prominence in Australia in 2005 at their album Wait Long by the River and the Bodies of Your Enemies Will Float By. They even won an Australian Music Prize for that. So that's pretty cool. I've never heard of them before, but maybe they're big in Australia. Maybe they never really hit the worldwide market. We have Gareth Lydiard on vocals and guitar, Fiona Kitchen on bass, Dan Lascombe on lead guitar, Steve Hesketh on keyboard, and Christian Stribach, hope I said that right, on drums. I wonder then if that was the bassist who provided the secondary vocals on, I don't remember what track that was. Was that a Moat You Can Stand In? Oh no, it was Nine Eyes, wasn't it? Yep, Nine Eyes. Like I said during that song, I liked the vocals. both in isolation and, stacked up against the primary vocalist. I'd love to hear more of those vocal harmonies. And it just dawned on me, there's only 2 tracks left. We probably won't get them again, but I kind of hope that they explore that on the 2016 album, which I think is their latest. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that this album was recorded independently, which I thought was pretty cool. And that according to the Rate Your Music community, this is classified as punk, blues, and art rock with a little sprinkling of noise and post rocks. Yeah, I can see all that. I still think indie rock. See, the thing is a punk blues doesn't seem like a real thing to me. It feels like one of those sub genres that somebody mentioned in passing and somehow it might have caught on. But art rock also feels very strange for this. I can see where it's coming from, but yeah, it doesn't match. But here's the thing: art rock is like this huge umbrella. It doesn't match up with my idea of art rock, but it is taking rock as a basis and creating art out of it, doing things a little outside of the box, but not in a typically prog direction. And that's where things kind of get hazy between art and prog and eclectic. No, what's that word? Experimental and avant garde. All four have a lot of crossover in what they do. Because they're all sort of taking the base and doing something new with it. So I don't know where I would put this in my own personal genre collection. Punk, blues, and art rock feel very strange to me, though. Like I said, punk blues just doesn't feel like a real genre to me. So yeah, I just wanted to bring some of that up. Oh wait, yes, Fiona does do backing vocals. Oh, the guitarist and lead vocalist also was the recording engineer, the mix engineer, also did graphic design. The drummer. That drummer is different than what was listed on Genius. I wonder if Christian is maybe their new or their old drummer. But according to Rate Your Music, Mike Noga was the drummer for this album. Everyone else was accurate. We also have Amanda Roth doing backup vocals. So, I don't know. Almost everybody does backing vocals. Dan, the lead guitarist, also has backing vocals. Mike, the drummer, has backing vocals. I don't know where all these would pop in. I don't hear that many backup vocals, but maybe I just assumed that a lot of them were just double tracked of the main vocalist. I don't know. Anyways, let's proceed on with the last two. All right, moving on to Laika. Let's see what's going on here. The slight out of phase on the two guitars.
And all the dim companions of the old white dwarf watch him throwing sugar on an old blackboard.
Say throwing sugar on a blackboard?
Can't stay in the classroom till the end of God. Now Laika's in the backseat of a lunar car. She was the first to leave home in a
I like that piano part.
long time, but vanished with a tail on fire.
Oh, we actually get to hear more vocal layering.
She was born under a family adrift as though she were a speck of dust, snubbed by walls of metal and their Baltic core, then fight into a canyon of polite applause through half a pound of sugar, half a pound of sugar, half a pound of sugar on an old blackboard, half a pound of sugar on an old
Okay, yeah.
blackboard.
Where are we building to? We got the toms, the two vocals. Oh, I love that piano line. More toms. We got Accelerando going on too. Very theatric progression here.
She don't see it coming and she's got no way. One day they'll build a statue, put it in the yard to show to all the children and the palace sky. One day, all you children.
Really high pitched stuff over there.
One day, all you children. And one day, all you children will be white dwarfs too. You cave under yourselves and become cruel, cruel.
Slowly getting out of sync with everything. And see, just what I was talking about last break. About songs that feel like they're building towards something, a transition to another track. I mean, part of it is that I have track length in front of me. It's not like I'm listening to this on, a cassette or something where I don't know how far into a track I am. I can see that there's a few seconds left. I see we're building up this idea. I'm expecting it to transition over, and it doesn't. They cut everything off right before the track change. Part of me finds that kind of bizarre, but it's also just kind of becoming their thing, their shtick, the thing I can lean on and expect that they're going to build these tracks up and then diffuse them. And there, I actually thought, the penultimate song moving into the final big epic, why wouldn't they smash it together and make a 15-minute, uh, you know, big final song? The build-up seemed like that's where we were going, but they still found a reason and a way to wrap it up. Interesting. Uh, this song This song's interesting because it has the large high and low gap that we see in a lot of tracks on this album, but instead of jumping between the two and feeling that massive contrast, we start small, build up till we get very big, and then start small again. For a 6-minute song, we pretty much have two groups of these 3-minute build-ups. The vocals typically just say the same thing over and over and over with minor variation. Maybe there'll be slightly different pitches, or the delivery will change. One time a bit more legato and slurred, the other time more staccato and sharp and biting. The vocalists also love to sort of drag out vocal emphasis points, where maybe he'll be right on the beat for all three beats, and then the next time through he'll be just after the beat, sort of feeling like he's dragging a little bit behind. Minor variations to keep it interesting, but everything else around it is just growing in volume. Every 4 repetitions, we might add more layers or change up what we're doing on an instrument, but for the most part, it's just steady growth over multiple minutes. I ended up digging this. I think primarily because of the plethora of ideas. Slow burns are hit and miss with me. I'm very rarely ambivalent to a slow burn. It is either quite effective at taking its time getting to a point and that the payoff is worth it, or it's not effective and then the payoff isn't worth it and I would have much rather had anything else happen there. I'm glad that this was quite effective. Otherwise, this song could have been quite boring. And I suppose that if this sort of let's just repeat the same sentence over and over and over while the guitars get louder doesn't click with you, this probably was a rather boring song on the album. I found that it worked though, primarily because of what happens around it. Right, we have the guitars coming in. They're giving us these chordal hits, just presenting our chord progression as we go. The bass is in on that too. The drums both time around are very tom heavy. They start out rather slow, focusing on just the downbeats, and then introduce hits between the beats, throwing in eighth notes and 16th notes eventually to create this forward momentum with this core pulse behind it. I love that build up, going from something very small and direct. I mean, you don't get any more direct rhythmically than just playing every beat. Like I said earlier, this reaction, that's just being a metronome. You don't need an instrument to do that. You can just go buy a metronome. So, I mean, you don't get more basic than that. That's how we start, and we build from there. And it's just constantly evolving and changing, more ideas being presented between each beat, really driving it forward while, of course, the volume is still rising. I think that works. But also, what really helps make it click in the context of the album is that we just don't hear the toms too often on this album. It's a very bass kick and cymbal heavy album. The snare coming in for large bombastic sections, but just not a lot of tom work across the board. And so it's a cool little nod here, a little bit of extra timbre work that, much like bringing in the bells in some of the places, we have the violins in here too, or some sort of bowed string. A lot of these songs have unique timbres, I think primarily presented through the keyboard. None of them sound acoustic to my ears, including that piano that showed up a few times. But the idea is that it's not just the same 4 instruments this entire album. And I like the inclusion of the toms here. It's a way for the drums to get in on this whole game of adding more sound and different timbres to the music. So the drums are making this interesting. I already talked about the vocals, bringing in a bunch of different inflections and timings. I think that makes it interesting. But the last one that really stands out to me, well, I forgot. There's also the higher pitched vocals in here, the same ones that were on Nine Eyes that I was afraid we wouldn't hear again. I love their inclusion. What's really cool is they start out as almost a direct echo, a bit of a call and response, and then they line up, and then they phase shift. And it's no longer a call and response anymore. It's not even really a canon. One of the vocals hangs on to some syllables longer than the other one does, and they slowly just get out of phase where maybe they start the same way, but this one's just a little bit faster, and the gap gets larger and larger between them to a point where one of the vocals is singing while the other one is taking a breath because they just finished their line, and the first vocal set is still in the middle of that sentence. The second time through on the back half build up, I think they're actually singing two completely different things, which allows the phase shift to happen a bit more naturally, but still, they start out together and they drift apart. And I love that visualization. I love the other vocals just being so far above everything else. They're very airy, they're high reverb, they're quite high pitched. We don't have anything else in that range, I think, on this entire album. It's a real, and that's something that I probably should have mentioned on Nine Eyes too. And I just talked about the texture layering there of having the two types of voices. I didn't really go into that, but that lighter airiness versus his very harsh, grounded, gritty vocal style. But then also just that massive pitch range. It's not even just between the two vocals. It's that vocal and the band. Like I said, we don't really have any other instrument that really gets up there. And so it's interesting, at least for Nine Eyes and Laika, to have that pitch up there to really separate them from the other tracks, because nothing else really gets into that range. So it's really cool to see that. But yeah, I love everything that vocal line brings in rhythmically, compositionally, counterpointerly. What do we call that? Melodically, um, production, texture, sonic area, sonically. It's a great idea from every way that you can look at it. But the last thing I want to touch on is the violin. There's something about it. It sits on the outside of the band, and for the most part, it kind of gives us these pulses. Vum, 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 vum. It's the heartbeat of the song. It's that pulse that we were getting on the drums to begin with before they started getting a bit more technical. But aside from that, it's a new texture. And eventually, the left hand ones ends up doing tremolo bowing. And so we have this rising intensity, not just of the rising pitch and rising volume, but what once was this sort of heartbeat, this pulse behind the song is now a constant bowing back and forth. It feels anxious and tense and ready to go. It's momentum being held back. It's not just adding new melodic ideas, not just adding a bass line underneath it. We're adding emotion to it. Each layer is a new feeling. And I think that's one thing that really makes it click with me in a way that slow burns don't always. It also gets through it rather quickly, but part of that might just be my anticipation. What comes around the corner? What emotion? What sort of transformation are we going to see next? Don't get me wrong, I do enjoy slow burns that are more melodically and harmonically based, but I think the texture approach here works really well, and it is well within their wheelhouse. They are fantastic at approaching music writing through the concept primarily of sonic texture. That's not to say that there aren't interesting licks or riffs or melodies on this album. There's definitely some guitar solos that are going to stick with me, but what they excel at, I think, is using textures to make an atmosphere, to make a feeling palpable. And so them approaching a slow burn from almost a purely texture-based position, that's right up their alley, and they have the chops to see that through. And I think that's what makes this stand out a bit for me. It's just the excellent job of approaching a slow burn from that direction and actually having each of the layers kind of alter the emotional resonance of the buildup for me. Oh, also, there is an accelerando in there, and that is always a fantastic way to make a build-up feel energetic towards the end of it, is to just increase the speed, the tempo of what you're working with slowly over time. That's just going to work every time, I think. Let me check out some lyrics for this one, and we're going to move into the final track. Alright, and we have another song about the cruelty of those in power and how they view lesser of those beneath them. Though this one, it kind of distances itself a little bit, as it is about scientists and a dog, more so than people and people. This one is about Laika, a Soviet space dog who in the 70s was sent into orbit, and while the original story was that it was euthanized before it ran out of oxygen, the actual story is that it overheated while escaping orbit. Yep, it just burned up in its spacesuit. So that's pretty terrible. That's a real downer right there. The interesting thing about this dog is that it was a stray taken off the streets, trained, and then sent to its death. Granted, it was for science. I don't know how many of them knew it might not work too well, but I suppose there is a little bit, very tiny little bit, of innocence there where maybe they didn't have the data to know that this would happen. Still, it seems rather cruel to train an animal to go into space when they have no concept of space to begin with. So the metaphor here then again is those in power looking at those beneath them as less than. In this case, very directly less than because it's just an animal, right? So, and then putting them through a cruel experience and moving on with life. Well, that didn't work. Let's get another dog up there. Or wherever they went from that. It wasn't until 2008 that any sort of memorial was built for Laika. Which was, well, actually, remember I said that the original story was that it was euthanized before it ran out of oxygen. It took 30 years for the story to break that it actually burned up from overheating. And then it was 10, 15 years after that that a memorial was built for it. So, yeah, even when we have those in power, putting those beneath them in cruel situations, the real information, the truth of the story doesn't even come out until decades later. It's about control on every single level. This takes the stories that we have seen so far on this album and puts it in a bit more of a metaphorical perspective. This song kind of deviates a little bit from that and abstracts the idea. It does directly talk about Laika, but it also abstracts that concept and just converts into a generic, those without power doomed to be pushed around by those with. And then the repetition, 1/2 pound of sugar on an old blackboard. I could not figure out what that was supposed to mean at all. It's kind of obvious in retrospect, but it's a way of visualizing stars in the universe. To take some sugar, splatter it on a blackboard, and you'll get something that looks like stars. What that really has to do with anything else, I'm not entirely sure. The last stanza, though, states, "And one day all you children will be white dwarves too, and you'll cave under yourselves and become cruel, cruel, cruel." This is sort of indictment about the human race in general, but I do think that it's an interesting subversion. It's a sort of a reminder that these scientists were once innocent children. That these people who basically killed a dog for science, they were once children, just innocent little things. But the reminder that any child could also become cruel like this. But I think it might even lean a little bit towards you will become cruel. It says one day all of you children will cave and become cruel. And I think that's more of an indictment about humanity and the lack of empathy generally spoken about regarding to the human race. I think this is a bit misguided. That's just my opinion on it. Humans can certainly be cruel, but humans are also capable of wildly brilliant, beautiful empathy. So we have done some amazing things to help those around us as well. But I understand the frustration here too, and I kind of understand where the vocalist is coming from. How any of this pairs back to the music, though, your guess is as good as mine. These lyrics were not anything that I was expecting regarding the music that I heard and the story it told, the double build-up. So now that we've had a double build-up, how are they going to wrap this album up? Last track.
We don't write letters anymore. There ain't the time or place. But a friend of mine wrote something like a letter yesterday. It was smuggled through my inbox just this morning, 3 a.m. More important than important, but let me read it now verbatim. He says, I got that same old feeling, the one that turns the birds to brutes.
That gentle chord
The sky is
on the
like
piano, the
bad
cross stick
dream
with the light
and
symbol.
the earth is in cahoots. I don't believe no one no more. I don't care what no one says. I just want to make the world
Subtle violin work. This is nice.
place. And we look fun.
A drastic departure from everything else.
They drift further away. But why, if everyone feels so homesick, are they always setting sail? 'Cause it's all bad news up there on deck, and each headland masks the next. I'd just as soon dive in the ocean and forgot the blood and sweat, and forgot all aspirations. They just put everyone at odds. If idle hands are the devil's work, then where's the time for God's? Oh yeah. Why write a letter that you'll never send away?
Bringing that country twanginess back. We only saw that in one other song, I think.
Stay with me, wait and see, and all you need know. Nobody's perfect and their needs are always starved. Wait, you'll see, and all you need know. Everybody's hurting and their needs are always starved. Stay.
Yeah, this is
Who
nice.
cares about wars of choice in lands where states indulge their passions And all the new shoots just jackboot scoot all descent out of fashion like Fred Astaire's at a film premiere that is all about them. It's stirring stuff, transformative. They don't care where they're sent. And they're all kiss-chasing childish dreams of a privileged masculinity till they're spent by shock and discharge home to small town and big cities. And the rest of the type left, they're dying or dead from just trying to be useful. They've been handy in the years gone by, and they'll be handy in the future. And who cares for their survival? And who cares about the Yanks? Who cares if they get overrun by Chinese nukes and tanks? And who cares about the Holocaust? Man, we didn't learn nothing there. And all its memory does is keep the History Channel on air. And who cares about that Vatican? Man, everybody knows. And who's surprised they went and chose a Nazi for a pope? And who cares about fakes like anarchists? Man, they never want to dance. Let's Mabel Mogadishu give anarchy a chance. I'm saying life is cruel.
I love that piano line.
True, but all sides still try to recruit you for sacred laws as practical as doing a Kama Sutra. And why write a letter that you'll never send away? Stay with me, wait and see, and all you need know. Nobody's
All that weight of the
perfect
build-up in that
and
second
it's
verse leading back to this.
always start. Wait, you'll see, and all you need know. Everybody's gets the fact that needs are always start. And who cares if the starving millions know if it's Christmas or your birthday, or what movie stars in Africa, or the guy from U2 says, or all the statesmen never telling lies as truth or gospel. Who cares what's true or false? The truth's the world won't go to hospital. But who needs to live forever? And who needs the extra miles? We won't need bees or seed banks in the Arctic for a while. We play the game to start again, not to better life for all. It's the appropriate opiate when the better way is impossible. Some honesty now wouldn't go astray, and if not, well, what's the use? We're animals, we can't help doing what all animals do. So goodbye, my friend, I'm hitting sand. Forgive me talking straight. I'm only trying to make the world a much less painful place. And why write a letter that you'll never send away?
That was unexpected, to say the least. You've spent the previous 45 minutes or so showing me how you guys are so punk and noisy, playing around with dissonance and intonation, noise and static, contrasting ideas, and you wrap it up with sort of a loungy musical number. Granted, we do have that build up in the second verse that acts as almost a symmetrical peak of the song. But even that wasn't as noisy as they've shown in the past. They could have easily turned that into a very big, disastrous moment, and instead they just allowed it to get large without becoming noisy. It's an interesting idea. In isolation, let's talk about what it's doing. It's piano, vocals, and drums. Very light drums. As I mentioned, it's cross stick almost the entire way. Actually, I think it's the entire song is cross stick. It's a very light way to get that snare accent, that snare sound without hitting the snare. um, we do have some violin that comes in a little bit at times. There's a bass that sort of resonates at the low end occasionally. Everything sits on the periphery though. Drums, piano, vocals, that's the core element. It's what so many parts of this is made up of. The piano gives us foundation. We get chord progression out of it. Occasionally, some flourishy lines. I really love those. They act as a way to fill space for just the piano line, but also it typically helps fill space with the vocals leave as well. It's a really cool way of sort of saying, okay, I'm the piano, the vocals are above me, I'm playing the accompanying part to the lead melody, but I'm not just this role, and I can complement the lead as well. The vocals are a bit varied with its rhythmic structure. I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that this is not poetic. I mean, that's not to say that the vocabulary isn't poetic. There's a few lines that I picked up that are like, yeah, okay, that lines up with my expectations for them so far. But as far as rhyme schemes, rhythmic meter, this kind of gets rid of what they've shown this entire time and goes for something that feels a bit more colloquial. It feels like spoken word turned to song, which I think it's supposed to. I remember a line at the beginning, he said he got a letter and he's going to read it to us or something like that. I don't know if that ever stopped or if the entirety of the song is the letter. Um, but we've ditched pretty much entirely the rhyme scheming that we have seen up to this point in order or in favor of something that's just language. It rhymes about as much as I tend to rhyme when analyzing songs. It's not a core focus of what I'm trying to do here, so it doesn't pop up very often. All of this creates something that feels rooted, grounded, unlike most of the other songs here, which all reach a fantastic element to them, something that kind of pushes it into the realm of artistry. This feels almost real in a sense. That is at least up until that second, well, the chorus, honestly. I was going to say the second verse, and that is a point where it sort of really crosses the line into artistry, but the chorus, for sure. The chorus makes it feel like a song rather than someone just singing at the same time that we have some music going on. The chorus brings in the second vocalist, which is something that I'm growing to love on the back end of this album, and something I kind of wish we had more of, but I'm going to accept the three songs that we hear this in, and it creates a counterpoint to the main vocals. Starting off what sounds like they're going to harmonize, but instead going their own ways and deviating. This is also where a bunch of the expanded instrumentation comes in. Um, And from here, we begin to incorporate some of that electric guitar work just a hair bit. This is a rather layered section. There are a lot of moving parts going on, and there's not a lot of purely foundational concepts here either. It's one of the things I love about this chorus and why it puts a smile on my face every time we get back to it. Um, it's the one chorus I think in this entire song that isn't focusing on largeness of scope. It is a larger scope than the first verse, but its purpose isn't to stand as stark contrast to create this very big moment against the smaller verses, which is how a lot of these songs are written. Instead, this is just supposed to be more involved. That's how I read it. It is louder, but simply because there's more instruments. It's more complex, simply because there's more depth to it. But it isn't trying to ape the verse that came before it. It just has more things to say. And I like that distinction here. But this does give way to that second verse, and we begin to see a bit more of a rock edge come in, especially with the electric guitar, the focus on quarter note downbeats to create this almost stomping sound, the rising intensity, the darkness that's being presented in the chords. It's the only time I think that the piano gets overshadowed by everything else. There is this marching bleakness that is taking over the entire song at this point, and nothing that was prominent prior can stand up to it. Even the vocals, which have been predominantly in the spotlight this entire album, are beginning to get swallowed up by this rising energy. It creates a peak almost right in the middle of the song before bringing that energy back down, and that's the last we hear of it. The song returns back to that loungy musical vibe and never really deviates from it again. It's a song that's also consonant, constantly. We had a little tinge of dissonance in there at one point in time during that second verse, but that's really it. This song is so different from anything else they've written. I kind of hate to say that it's my favorite. I'm not a big fan of saying that the one deviation is my favorite song on an album because it's not really indicative of that album. This is still, I think, technically my favorite track, but it's not the one that I would present to people if I wanted them to understand the drones. At least not this era of the drones. It stands out so starkly against the rest, but I think is a well, musically, it's a bit sobering, isn't it? Compared to the rest. It's almost as if they've put all this energy and pain and anger out in the previous 40 minutes, and at the end, they're like, well, let's just take this down a notch. Let's just end on a low note. And that's what this song feels like. We don't really have a bridge. We don't have some wild guitar solos. We don't have crazy sounds coming out of the instruments. It's just straightforward chord progression, vocal melody, and some drums, some occasional other layers. I'm curious what's going on in the lyrics. So let's jump into that and see how they wrap this up thematically. And this song is about presumably a suicide note. That would be, I suppose, a letter that you'll never send. Verse 1 starts, "We don't write letters anymore, but a friend of mine wrote something like a letter yesterday. It was smuggled through my inbox just this morning at 3 a.m. More impotent than important. Let me read it now verbatim." So yes, that's why it comes off a bit more colloquial and spoken rather than poetic. I don't know if this is just a framing for the story or maybe it's based off of an actual thing. Maybe this is a real letter. I don't know. As usual, it really doesn't matter in the scope of the art. The idea of the letter generally says that the world sucks and continues to get worse. At one point, even saying that, where is it? It's about truth. All right. So he says, who cares if the starving millions know if it's Christmas or your birthday or what the movie stars in Africa or the guy from U2 says or all the statesmen who never tell lies as truth or gospel? Who cares what's true or false? The truth is, the world won't go to the hospital. The world needs fixing, and it won't. It can't, even. Those in charge refuse to let it get healed. That's the main concept here, is that we've kind of screwed up pretty heavily, and there's no turning back. Things are only going to get worse. Talks about feeling how the old days kind of looked better, but looking back on them, it was more of naivety than anything else. It just seemed like a much less painful place. He says that all he ever wants to do is make the world a little less painful to be in. Verse 2 talks about wars and how you can't stop them. They just keep going. There's always another war to fight. There's more hatred ahead of us. He says, who cares about the Yanks? Who cares if they get overrun by Chinese nukes and tanks? Who cares about the Holocaust? Because, dude, we didn't learn anything there. All its memory does is keep the History Channel on air. Just, golly. And you know, the sad thing is, it's truer today, I think. I mean, we definitely had rising neo-Nazism going on in 2013 when this album dropped, but look what's going on in the world right now. I mean, we have freaking Holocaust deniers. We certainly didn't learn anything. And the fact that we continue to put these types of people in power even says that we had a Nazi for a pope. Now, I didn't catch this on my own, but apparently Pope Benedict the 16th, when he was 14, was conscripted into the Hitler Youth. Now, according to his brother, apparently he was an unenthusiastic member who refused to attend meetings, so maybe, but also maybe, he was still part of the Hitler Youth. So the idea here, though, is like he said, who cares? Who is actually surprised by this anyways, and what is it going to matter in the long run? In the end, he's just trying to make the world a much less painful place, and he doesn't really see a way to do that. So, saying deuces, he's getting out of here. And that's his suicide letter. Why he feels he is no longer able to be in this world. The chorus says, why write a letter you'll never send? Stay with me, wait and see, and all you need know is that nobody's perfect and their needs are always stark. He basically says we're all in the same boat with you, dude. We're trying. Things will get better, I promise, but it's going to take time. Basically, dude, don't commit suicide, right? The world's better with you in it. I don't think it really says if this person took their life or not. And again, I don't really think it matters. I think that the song is primarily there, whether it is a true story and a real letter that was written, or a simple story with a nice framing around it that gives it a grounded rootedness. The concept here is a feeling of weakness, an inability to make any meaningful change in the world, and how that can lead someone to feel like their place isn't here. It also does a fantastic job of leading on everything that's been alluded to so far in the album and really putting it in bold words. This is all the garbage that our world goes through in only the past 100 years. Humanity has been like this forever. Humanity is terrible. That seems to be the general theme of the album. This just states a lot of specific incidences where humans are terrible. But there's also the chorus, which I think is a burst of hopefulness in an album that's rather depressing. A lot of this album basically says that there's no way to win, that those in power are always going to have power, and they're just going to continue to kick those below them. This is a solitary moment of hope against that. That even as terrible as things are, even as hopeless as things seem, we still make the world better. We need people like us to combat the evilness out there, to balance it out. If all the good people took their lives, the earth would really be shot then. At least that's what I get out of this final one. It's so distinct in sonic identity, in lyrical theme. It stands in opposition to the rest of the album on so many levels, and I think that's the point of it. You can only put so much angst into a work of art before you also kind of have to show a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's what they tried to do here. Ultimately, though, I think the song just kind of gets me down more. The chorus, as much as I love it musically, kind of falls flat lyrically. It doesn't really feel like it has that passion behind it. There's no hope there, not in the delivery, just in the words. It feels like a mask, an attempt to fake something into reality, to say it enough that it becomes real. But the verses going on and on and on, listing all the ways that the planet is shit right now, that speaks louder. That verse 2 is heavier. And it takes up a vast majority more of the runtime of the song than the positivity. It ends up just being a very dreary, bleak outro track on this album, at least for me. Those are my thoughts, I suppose. The drones, I see seaweed. What are your thoughts? Is there anything that stands out to you on this album? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said, or maybe correct me on some things I said? Maybe just have your own interpretation or opinion on this album. Let me know. Put that and any other thoughts you might have in the comment section of this video. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. UTC. It'll be the final live stream for the year. And then Monday kicks off the last week of reactions for the year. The last week of December and the first week of January, I'll be taking off for my biannual break. And we'll come back on, what is it, like January 4th or something? January 5th? Yes. January 5th, we'll have the first live stream of 2025. Alright, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.